So welcome again. My name is Yaima Braga, and I'm the Renewable Energy Procurement Director at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. And today we're going to talk about how to buy clean electricity. Okay, so before we get started, I do want to point out that on the GoToWebinar panel there on your right, you should have a question section. So I definitely do invite you that at any time during the webinar to please type either your clarifying questions or any questions that you might have. I'll stop for any clarifying points throughout the presentation if needed. But if not, there will be plenty of time at the end to address any lingering thoughts or comments or questions that we might have. So the agenda for today is to talk about electricity and RECs, your clean electricity options, how to beware of greenwashing practices, and next steps. So first of all, who is Green Energy Consumers Alliance? So we are a nonprofit organization. We've been around since the 1980s, and we are based in Providence and Boston. And we've been around since, again, since 1982. And we merged both states in 2006. And we've helped tens of thousands of people access green energy. And we just have a comprehensive set of programs that enable consumers to make green energy choices. All right, so let's get started to the good stuff. For electricity information in general, where we have that electrons flow according to physics, and that suppliers must meet the consumer needs through contracts. So there are basically two things that happen when we're talking about clean electricity, right? We have the electrons that get generated and those flow into the grid. And then we also have at the same time the renewable energy certificates or RECs. And those two things are tracked separately. So a consumer can buy the power, which is those electrons, but also must purchase the RECs in order to make the claim that their electricity is coming from green or clean electricity. So we're going to be talking a lot about these RECs. So what are they? So when we're talking about Class 1 RECs, that's basically a label put on by Massachusetts, but for the folks in Rhode Island, that's also known as Rhode Island New. And basically, it's just a market factor that is just designed to encourage the development of renewable energy so we can have some sort of way of tagging and tracking renewable energy. So when we're talking about one REC, that's the equivalent of 1 megawatt hour or 1 kilowatt hour of renewable energy, right? So if you're looking at your bill, you're mostly going to see everything being reported in kilowatt hours of electricity. So for renewables, right, we're talking about wind, solar, small scale hydro, digester gas plants, and some other biomass projects. So a Class 1 is going to be new projects. They're going to be built after 1997. And in Massachusetts, in Rhode Island, and New England, the average home uses about 7 RECs per year, right? But again, they're separate from, but they represent those electrons. So they can be tracked and certified by, we have the New England Power Pool, which is the database that was created. It's called the Generation Information System, and that's where all the RECs are distributed and accounted for, especially so that there's no double counting and no missing of electricity. And we make sure that one REC is held by only one individual at a time. And these RECs can be sold for monetary value. So whoever is that final owner of the RECs is the one that can take that ownership, and also they have to retire it to be able to make that claim. So let's see a little diagram of how this actually works. So there we see in the screen some electrons, right? We can see them flowing there in the utility or the transformers there. So right there, they're just flowing there, able for anyone to tap onto them. So let's look at the wind turbine on the left. So let's say that the wind turbine is spinning and it generates 1 megawatt of electron that it goes into the grid, just like we saw that electron be created. So at the same time, it generates 1 rec, and then that rec gets moved into the to the database where it goes to the wind turbine's owner's account, right? But they don't have to keep that certificate for them. They can sell it if they can find someone to do so. So let's say that the house, the blue house there on the right, that's connected to the grid, buys the electricity from the grid, right? We see the electron flowing, and they have to also purchase that rec to be able to make the claim that, voila, they have their green electricity. So that way the house becomes green, and right, we weren't able to tell where that electron came from. It's all together in that same pool. But because they purchased that certificate from the wind turbine owner, but also it can be from the utility or from a third party that has that certificate at hand, as long as they're that final owner and they retire it in the database, they're the ones who can make the claim, hey, I am the owner of this green electricity. So basically all accounts are automatically enrolled in the utilities standard mix. So in Massachusetts, that's known as basic service, or in Rhode Island, we have the standard offer. And they all have a state requirement of clean electricity. So in Massachusetts, we have the renewable portfolio standard, or the RPS, and we also have the clean energy standard. And combined, they require suppliers to have 22% of their electricity load must be from renewable sources, from class 1 or new renewables in 2021. And in Rhode Island, we have the renewable energy standard, and this requires suppliers to have 19% of the new renewables. Oh, excuse me, I should have updated that to 2021. So it is 19% in 2021. In 2020, it was 17.5. It goes up 1.5% a year. So I apologize for that typo there. Right, so even if some folks that might not be enrolled in that standard mix and they have a competitive supplier that they have contracted with, even they have to satisfy that they've met that percentage requirement from the RPS or the RES by retiring RECs from renewable sources. So how can you buy clean electricity in a way that makes our grid better? So we have our Green Power program, where we buy Massachusetts Class 1 RECs and also Rhode Island new RECs. So this helps us displace fossil fuels, and also we give the market signal, right, that we are increasing the demand for renewables in New England. And this moves our power pool decades ahead of state law. So the more demand that we can create for these renewables ahead of what is actually being required by law, then we can push those resources and technologies even faster. So we currently provide 2 green power choices. That's going to be our Green Power 25%, where 25% of your electricity usage comes from Class 1 wind, solar, small hydro, and or digester gas resources. And we also have the Green Powered 100% product, where we match your usage 100% with wind resources in particular. And we do this with the wind only, mainly for 2 reasons. One is that wind, right, it's a zero greenhouse gas emission resource, and that's what we're looking for, where we want those clean resources. But also, wind in New England needs a little bit more help. A lot of states have invested a lot into their solar projects, and they have extra incentives. But wind really doesn't have that extra support that it needs to get built. So that's why we focus on the wind resource in particular for this offering. So these 2 choices are going to be above of what you are paying with your standard, your basic service or your standard offer. So for green power 25%, it's going to be 2.2 cents per kilowatt hour. Or for green powered 100%, it's going to be 3.8 cents per kilowatt hour. And the good news is that because we are a nonprofit organization, these contributions are actually considered as charitable contributions, and they are both 100% federally tax deductible. So every January, we sent out a letter to all of our customers telling them how much they've contributed. And if you itemize for your charitable contributions, you can put that in your taxes. So it's just a good news all around. So lately, there's been a movement for the whole communities to buy clean electricity for their residents and small businesses. And we call this model municipal aggregation, right? This is the process in which a municipality will decide to purchase or procure electricity in bulk for all of the residents and small businesses in its jurisdiction. Basically, anyone who is in basic service or standard offer can be enrolled into this. It's just usually the big accounts tend to be with a competitive supplier already. So why do they do it in bulk? Well, the more that you buy, the cheaper it's going to get. So they're going to get really competitive prices compared to what everyone else is paying. And why is this coming from a municipality? Well, they have the ability to do so and the power to do so by their town and city councils, and they can take control of what's actually coming in their electricity. So that's great, and it's also a state-approved plan. It gets overseen by either the Department of Public Utilities in Massachusetts or the Public Utility Commissions in Rhode Island, where it's also referred to as community choice aggregation. And how the model works is that the CCA or the municipality will procure the electricity, usually along with a broker. It's still going to be the utility who delivers the energy and maintains the grid. It's just going to be a separate competitive supplier who is going to be responsible for actually supplying that electricity. But the bill, again, is still going to come from either National Grid or Eversource or Unitil. And then it's going to be the customer at the end of the line who gets the cleaner energy, and they also have that local control and hopefully get those competitive rates. Green municipal aggregation is growing exponentially in Massachusetts. We've started the model back in 2016 with Melrose and Dedham. And they started with just offering 5% of above and beyond of what there's being required by law. And that's why we call it green municipal aggregation. But as you can see in the map in front of you, a lot of towns now, 5 years later, are committed to buying more Class 1 renewables than required by law. So you can see in the green the different ranges and percentages that they've committed to. And then in the brown, we can see some communities that don't have the additional green or have some additional Class 1s, but they have to opt up to other options. Something that I should mention about green municipal aggregation is that the model is called an opt-out model, where everyone in the municipality will get automatically enrolled into the program, and then you have to proactively opt out of that program, or you can also opt up. So we have a lot of communities that offer other options above of that standard offer. That's going to be either 50% matching the electricity or 100% matching the electricity, which is great. Again, we keep pushing that needle even more to support more Class 1 renewables. Community choice aggregation in Rhode Island really has now taken off. A couple of years ago, they had to change actually the state law so that instead of being the opt-in model, it's going to be now in Rhode Island also the opt-out model where everyone's automatically enrolled. So in order to do that in Rhode Island, they have to pass a resolution to change it in all the cities and towns that want to pursue aggregation. So we can see here in the map, in the lighter green, there's a lot of communities considering aggregation, and then there's all the ones in green have passed the lighter green have passed the the aggregation resolution. And then I apologize for the two lighter to darker greens. It's hard to differentiate, but Narragansett has, Narragansett Newport has passed its CCA plan, and then the town of Portsmouth has actually already submitted its plan to the PUC. So hopefully they'll be getting approval any day now. And then we have 4 communities that have already their plans approved by the PUC. And we hope that they're going to be coming online either by the end of the year or beginning of next. And what's very exciting with Rhode Island is that with their first programs, all the communities here in blue are actually targeting 10% more renewable energy in their offerings above of what is being required by the renewable energy standard. So that is great to see. We have a lot of our findings about how green municipal aggregation has worked in Massachusetts in our report. It's from February of 2020, and it's available on our website. And we have a lot of information about savings and about commitment to renewables, and also how can communities do more. Right, so all of these communities, which is great, is that we source our RECs from local sources. So as much as we can, we focus on projects that are right in our customers' backyard in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. You can see all the wind turbines, hydroelectric plants, solar projects, and also some digesters here and there that help us with the RECs that we provide for our customers. So they're all right here in New England. And we tend to also focus in small to medium scale projects that need that extra support from a contract with us. And we also try to help them in the longer term as much as we can, because we know that long-term contracts are vital for developers to get projects off the ground. And as you can see, these all are either zero emitting resources or resources that, in the case of digesters, they sequester carbon, right? So instead of that waste from farm waste going into the atmosphere, they can put it into the digester and generate electricity from it. So they're actually taking away emissions, which is great. And I apologize, I just saw that my question box was not showing, so I'm going to take a second here to read a question related to municipal aggregation. So how to find out if Leominster, Massachusetts, my hometown, participates in community choice aggregation. They have called the town office and they didn't know, they never got back to me. So it's unfortunately that you haven't heard of if they're pursuing green municipal aggregation. I honestly don't know to that level of detail if Leominster has a program right now. But I'll say even we are having a tough time this summer getting a hold of town officials, just because everyone, they're on vacation, moving around, and even so with the pandemic being around, most people are still working from home. But Susan, we'd be more than happy to work with you offline to see if we can get green municipal aggregation going in Leominster. And then I have another question related to solar that I'm actually going to save for the question and answer time. So Kevin, hold, I will answer your question in a couple minutes. So why do we keep saying class 1 RECs, right? Why do we have to really focus our efforts on buying class 1 RECs, and why do they matter? Well, this graph here shows us on the left a old New England hydro project, and those yellow bars are going to show you what is the levelized cost of actually building that hydro project. And then next to it with the blue and then the green sliver on top is going to show you the project revenue, right? The blue is going to be just the sale of the actual electrons, either through PPAs or net metering credits, what have you. And then on top of that blue, you see that green sliver, right? So that's going to be when they're selling those RECs. So when you compare the yellow bar with the blue bar, you can see that just alone with the sale of the electrons, the project's making money, right? So that green little sliver is just putting additional money into developers' pockets. The same thing is the case for a non-New England wind project, like the one we see in the middle there. So that's going to be your Texas wind or your Dakota winds, right? We have the yellow is going to tell you how much it costs to build a project, and then the blue is going to tell you how much they're getting for their electrons. And we can tell there that that green sliver is not really pushing that developer or incentivizing the developer to build more, right? They're still getting all of their revenue, or they're making money by just building the electrons. So it's not really sending those market signals with the purchase of the REC, right? You're just giving them additional money. But then on the right side, you can see there for a New England wind project, right? New England is not known a lot for its wind, or it's not that sunny here compared to other parts of the South. So we know that building renewable energy projects in New England is going to be a little bit more costly. And unfortunately, developers cannot make their money back by just selling the electrons themselves. They have to then get additional revenue when they are selling the RECs, and that's going to be that much wider, much bigger green portion that we see sitting on top of the blue. And it's thanks to selling those renewable energy certificates that they then are able to make a profit from these projects. So we call that incentives like the additionality, right? The selling of the RECs is really motivating for new developers to come over here and build new projects when you're buying the energy and the RECs. So it does matter the type and location of the RECs that you buy. So the spending should really translate into new projects that displace fossil fuels, and not so much subsidizing projects that would have like made that money with or without your help. So we really have to be careful when we are choosing some green power options from competitive suppliers, and we really need to educate ourselves. Are these RECs coming from national RECs, or are they class 1 RECs that are being sourced locally? So as I mentioned just now a little bit, so we have in Massachusetts and Rhode Island a choice when it comes to who is going to supply your electricity. So as I mentioned, the suppliers, so that the utilities will still be responsible for the distribution, transition, and transmission, and they're still going to send you your bill and be responsible for that. But the competitive suppliers can give you another option compared to the standard offer or basic service. So usually the suppliers will give you multi-year contracts, so that they lock you in for a little while. And we just really caution people to really be aware of the price offerings that they're giving you. Sometimes we know that competitive suppliers will give you an attractive price, but please be aware, like look to make sure how long that price or that rate will last through, if the rate will change over time. Also, what extraordinary provisions it might have, such as termination fees, if you decide to move, or if for some reason or another you have to cancel that contract at any amount of time. And again, if they offer the green electricity, you need to make sure that you ask yourself the question: did the renewable energy facility really need that REC revenue to be financially viable? If the answer is no, then there's going to be no additional emissions associated with that project, and then with that REC that you're buying. So there's no additionality. You're not motivating anyone really to build a new project. Versus if the answer to that question is yes, and you know that the emissions, there are reduction in emissions compared to other conditions, and you're really incentivizing for additional projects to get built, then you're going to have that class 1 resource, and there's not going to be emissions associated with that project. So a couple of years ago now, it's a couple of years now in the past, so it's probably due for an update. The Massachusetts Attorney General released a report on residential electricity supply, where they compared how much residential customers with competitive electricity suppliers were paying compared to basic service. So again, this is a little bit old, but they did a 3-year study from July 2015 until June of 2018. And you can see there in the table that every year they saw that customers were actually paying more when enrolled with competitive suppliers than with basic service. And in that 3-year span, there was a customer net loss of $253 million. So again, we just really caution people when moving to competitive electricity suppliers and to really look at those fine prints and really study up on what is it that they're coming into. So actually with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, our biggest customer is actually Mass Audubon. They have, in all of their sites, they match 100% of their electricity with wind RECs, right? So they're in their 100% option, and we match all of their usage with wind RECs. Because they know wind turbines are actually great for birds. Unfortunately, cats nowadays can kill more birds than the turbines do. And right, they're always being researching, investigating birds' behavior along with wind turbines, and they know that in the long run, wind turbines and their ability to displace fossil fuels is much better for the environment. So the wind turbines are much better for the environment than these fossil fuel plants that will create all that pollution that is harmful for the birds. So how can you buy clean electricity today? Well, we have on our website our forms that can help you to join. So it's greenenergyconsumers.org/greenpowered, but you can also give us a call if you want. We're happy to chat. So on our website, you can just click on make the switch now. You complete the online form and you can choose if you're going to go with the 25% option or the 100% option. And then we're going to give you an email confirming that you've enrolled in, well, that you have joined the program. You will continue to pay your electricity as normal, right? The charge, if you are a National Grid or Eversource West customer, you will be getting charged through your bill. But if you do to receive your bills from Eversource East, then you will be charged separately on your credit card, and we'll send you a lot of information about that. Again, so if you do live in a community where you want to have green municipal aggregation, so that you have green municipal aggregation, you can call your supplier and you can opt in to the 50% if available or 100% products. So you can just search online for the aggregation programs and see who the supplier is and give them a call. But again, if like Susan, you're in a community that does not have community choice aggregation, definitely reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to help you. So that is what we have for you today. Again, any questions that we didn't answer today, I'm available in the email address and phone number there. And I'm gonna then just jump back to questions. So we have a question from Kevin that he asked that he purchased a house with solar panels installed in 2018, and you use all of the solar generated, and then they're selling their what's called the solar renewable energy certificates, or SRECs. And the question is, how can someone who purchases those extras claim to be using renewable kilowatt hours when we already use the kilowatt hours generated? All right, Kevin. So I'm going to take you back for a second here, back to the diagram that we showed with the wind turbine. But in this case, you can imagine that instead of the wind turbine, it's going to be your house over here with the panels, right? So when your solar is going, anyways, it's not moving for me at the time. No. So you're going to have the electron generated from your solar house. So the electron goes into the grid And then you also have the REC gets generated separately. So even though the solar panels are, right, they're connected through your house, and then through your house, then they are being channeled back into the grid, and you are selling those SRECs. I am going to tell you that you, as an individual, cannot say that your electricity is coming from those solar panels, even though they're physically located in your house. The legal claim, right, and the legal instrument that you have to be able to make that claim is that SREC that you are selling off. So even though you're getting those credits in your account for generating that electricity in your property, unfortunately, you cannot make the claim that your electricity is coming from a clean energy resource. So what a lot of people do, and it's something actually that Mass Audubon is doing themselves, because they have solar in a lot of their facilities that are also SRECs, and those are worth a little bit more money than your regular REC. Because again, I mentioned that solar in Massachusetts, they get a little bit more incentive. So what Mass Audubon does is that for all of the SRECs that they generate, they sell them, right? And they use the profit for their recreational grounds. And then they also use them to then buy class 1 wind RECs that match 100% of their usage, so that they can keep making the claim that their electricity is coming from renewable energy sources. So I hope that answers your question. Anyone who has solar on their roof, they can still be a part of the Green Power program. That you can decide to match your electricity either 25% or 100%. And if you are in a green municipal aggregation community, you can have either the standard offer, which will give you whatever the community is doing, right? So we have, for example, like Brookline's doing 30%, or we have Somerville's doing 10% additional. So you will have that matching of your usage, or if you decide to opt up, then you can have the 50% or 100% of your electricity being matched with the class 1 RECs. All right, I'm just gonna go back here. All right, so next question is, can you explain how a digestion functions cost and environmental benefits? Unfortunately, I can't get into too much detail. I can talk about the environmental benefits again. So all of the digesters that we purchase from, you can see them here on our map. We have, I believe, yeah, there's one of them located, no, there's two of them located at a farm, and then there's another one located at a wastewater treatment plant. So what they do is that they take the waste from their activities. So you can take the farm waste, or all the, also from the water facilities, you can take all of the waste in, and you can put it into that digester. And instead of, like either selling the manure for organic and other farming purposes, and just having and further treating any other waste, they put into the digester, right? And they generate all those gases that help then the turbines inside the digester to generate electricity. So the gases stay inside the digester itself, and they don't get released into the atmosphere. So that's your big environmental benefit right there, that they will sequester gases instead of emitting them 100%, right? The digesters still will emit at the most, I will say they emit about 10% of the emissions that would otherwise, they sequester 90% of the emissions that would otherwise would have gone into the atmosphere. Cost-wise, I know that they are a little bit more expensive, but there's a lot of incentives being done by the state, and also by the incentive in itself, that it generates that electricity that the owner of the digester, especially if it's a farm, they can get that reduction in their electricity bills, and they also can pay for any excess electricity that they generated, plus they're selling the RECs. So it's just another source of income for them. So that's mainly what motivates them, is going to be those environmental benefits as well as those financial benefits. So I get another question asking, how does this compare with residential solar? So I kind of talked about it a little bit before, is that for residential solar, specifically in Massachusetts, you tend to not own the RECs that are tied to the electricity that you generate. So any system that was built from 2010 until 2018, that's part of the SREC program, and actually 2019. So the SREC program, those SRECs are worth a lot of money. So almost everyone who generates them is going to sell them off, right, to make the money back that they invested into the solar project. So most people, that they sell them off, again, you can't make the claim that your electricity is green. Anyone who built their own residential solar project after 2019 and is part of what is now called the SMART program, when they sell their electricity and they generate the electricity, because of the program that is now running the guidelines, the electrons and the RECs are sold together for a higher price. So then again, you as a homeowner, even though you have solar on the roof, you are not going to be the owner of the REC, and you cannot make the claim that your electricity is coming from renewable energies. So if you have solar on your roof, I would say 90%, 95% chance that you do not generate you do not get to own those RECs that you are generating. So therefore, you would have to come to a program like us, a product like ours, and match your electricity usage with the Class 1 RECs, so that you can make that additional impact in the region. Question says, near the beginning you said it's not necessary to retire your REC. What does it mean to retire a REC? So when we talked a little bit about the RECs, we said that in New England there is a database where all the RECs live, right, and they get moved around. So it's not necessary to retire the REC, right? So for example, if Green Energy Consumers Alliance has solars on the roof, when those RECs get generated, they're deposited into our database account. But if we don't want to be the owners of those RECs, right, if we want to sell them off to further support our renewable project, then we can sell them off and transfer it into someone else. So for us, it's not necessary to retire the REC, but if you are going to be that last owner of the REC, then you do need to retire it. That's definitely a requirement. But again, when we're talking about RECs, we're talking about megawatt hours, and most residential customers, we're talking about kilowatt hours. So usually what happens is that utilities or competitive suppliers will retire the REC for you in programs like this. So anyone who's in our products, we retire the REC on your behalf. And any competitive supplier in our green municipal aggregation programs, the competitive supplier will retire the REC on your behalf. And then what happens is every 6 months, we have what is called a disclosure label, and we disclose what is being retired, so you can see exactly where everything's coming from. Let's see. Can you talk a bit more about how Green Energy Consumers Alliance ensures the renewable energy projects they invest in are truly diverting away from fossil fuels? Also, can you talk about when an individual switches to your program, if they're actually making an impact on renewable energy development? And then finally, 3 questions on this one. How does Green Energy Consumers Alliance ensure the price per kilowatt hour does not change for green power choices? All right, that's a good one. So I'm going to take the first one. How can we ensure that we are diverting away from fossil fuels? So that's a good question. And a point that I wanted to touch on before, and I skipped to it unfortunately, is that so all of these purchases, right, they're coming from voluntary purchases, but we are still buying the Class 1 RECs that are being used by the utilities and the suppliers to meet the RPS or meet the RES. So basically, we're playing keep away from the utilities, and we're taking away RECs that they cannot use to meet those requirements. So in 2020, I believe about 1% of the Class 1 RECs were used for voluntary purchases. But thanks to programs like ours, and specifically thanks to Green Municipal Aggregation, we're projecting that in 2020, 7% of all of the Class 1s being generated in all of New England, right? So Class 1 RECs are being generated in all 6 New England states with all of these different technologies. 7% are going to come from renewable energies, voluntary purchases, right? So I know it doesn't seem like much, but we're talking about thousands of megawatt hours or millions of kilowatt hours. So we are moving the needle slowly but surely. So by buying the Class 1 RECs, the RECs that are being used for compliance and taking them away from others, is helping move the needle, versus if you buy let's say a voluntary REC from Texas or North Dakota, those are not being used for state requirement purposes. They're just, again, they're called voluntary RECs, and the organization that usually oversees those is Greenie. They're not being used for anything else, just for people making the claim that, hey, it's coming from green electricity from somewhere else. We don't see that those are helping to move the needle. The next one was when an individual switches to your program, they're actually making an impact on renewable energy development. So I left our map there on the screen so you can see all of the different projects that we contract with. I mentioned before, we as an organization, we know developers really need support from people who are buying the RECs in the longer term. But all of our customers, they're enrolled, individual customers just enroll, right, on a monthly basis on their bill, and they can opt in or opt out at any time, right? Anytime you can tell the utility, hey, like, I don't want to be part of green energy consumers anymore. Can you cancel it on my bill? And you can do that. And then for Green Municipal Aggregation, even though we're trying to push communities to have longer contracts, communities are only right now willing to entertain 2 to 4 year contracts. That's the longest we've seen, and it's only been with one community, it's been a 4-year contract. And developers can take a 4-year contract and go to the bank and be like, hey, I have someone that is going to buy my RECs for 4 years. Can I please get a loan for 10, 20 years to build my project, you know, that I can pay off? That math is just not going to work. So Green Energy Consumers tries to focus as much as we can on doing long-term contracts, so these developers have the confidence and have the financial backing to be able to build these projects. I can tell you there's 2 solar projects that are listed on our map that they're in non-Providence and in Johnston. So we met the developer back in 2016, I believe, yeah. And they came to us, they said, like, I have these 2 solar projects in Rhode Island. They're in cap landfills. You know, there's so many megawatts. The people taking the actual energies, public entities, they're great projects. But we're looking for someone to buy the RECs from us in order for the project to get built. And we looked at the project, we saw that all of those good things, right? Cap landfill, it's solar, so no emissions, and it's helping public entities to get some credits on their bill. And we talked to them and we decided to sign a long-term contract with them, so they could then, you know, have that financial backing to be able to build those projects. So then as soon as they secure the contract, they broke ground, and sure enough, a couple of years later, they're now supplying power to their grid. And there's stories like that with a couple other projects that you can see listed there, that we're able to provide that long-term support for the projects so that they can build, even though all of our customers are going to be enrolled with us on a short-term basis. And the last is, how does green energy ensure that the price per kilowatt hour does not change? So that's actually a risk, right, that we take. We study the market very closely every day. We're looking at what demand forces are playing, how the supply is going up and down. But at the end of the day, if you look at our terms and conditions of our program, especially for a green power program, we have pledged to never increase the power of our the cost and the rate of our program. If anything, the rate, we want to lower it as much as we can. So a couple years ago, the green power 25% product used to be 2.4 cents per kilowatt hour. And due to some changes in the market and then the content that we have, we were able to lower it to 2.2 cents per kilowatt hour. So that was great. We were able to lower it. And I'll tell you real quick, for the 100% product that's going to be wind, we've seen times where the market rate for a REC has been above and really beyond of 3.8 cents per kilowatt hour, but we still offer that price to our customers. So that's something that we pledge to do, and we try not to change it for our green powered program. And then for green municipal aggregation, so that's going to be a little different, where the aggregation is going to go into that contract for how many years they're looking to, and they have that rate locked into, right? So if they do a 4-year contract, they have the rate per kilowatt hour locked in for those 4-year prices, but right, there's nothing to know what the rate is going to be after those 4 years. So that's why we've been in constant communication with aggregations to see if they want to do, and they should do, a longer term contract, so that customers don't see any rate increases or crazy rate changes, and we further support developers on a long-term basis. So I hope, Tricia, that answers your question. So Kevin asked, will you post a recording of this webinar? And the answer is yes, we will. I don't know if our marketing team posts the recording on our website, but I will share with you, once it's available, an email that would have the link to our YouTube channel, and that will have that recording. So yes, we'll share that with you. Let's see. And then I have another question that's related to RECs. If the REC is retired, it's no longer be able to be sold or traded. That's right. Once you retire the RECs, you cannot trade it, so transfer it, you can't do anything with it. You are that final owner, or whoever retired it is the final owner of that REC. One last question for now is if you generated renewable energy and have disconnected from the grid, do you own the RECs, and how do you sell them? So it is on the New England Power Pool guidelines that for you to be able to generate a REC, it has to be connected to the grid. So if you have, I guess it's a solar, let's say a solar system that's connected to a house or something else, but it's not connected to the grid, technically you own the REC, because you have your solar and you're using that energy, and you're not connecting it back to the grid, so you're not sending it to anyone else. So you have to be connected to the grid to be able to participate in the market, basically. Great questions today. I don't see any more. So if you have any final thoughts or questions, feel free to type them in. But I will put my information, right there in the screen again. Thank you so much. This has been a great webinar, especially with all those good questions. And I'll hang around for a minute or two more. But thank you again, and have a great day.